Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Burns, welcome to the committee. The Chinese Communist Party cannot be trusted. The world has seen China's brutality, deception, illegal activities. We've seen China cover up, spread disinformation about the coronavirus. We've seen China destroy Hong Kong's autonomy. We've seen them engage in unlawful military activities in the South China Sea. We've seen China steal American intellectual property, commit terrible human rights abuses. Now, these to me are actions of a dangerous and authoritarian regime. It's not a nation committed to the rule of law, to free markets, to protecting the rights of people. It's clear the United States and the international community must hold China accountable for its increasingly dangerous behavior. So just recently, the CIA Director Bill Burns stated that China presents the greatest challenge to U.S. interests and to international order, close quote. He also announced the creation of a new China Mission Center to, quote, strengthen our collective work on the most important geopolitical threat that we face in the 21st century, which is an increasingly adversarial Chinese government. Do you concur and believe that China's increasingly adversarial government is the most important geopolitical threat that the United States faces in the 21st century?
Thank you, Senator. I agree with my longtime friend and Foreign Service colleague, Director Bill Burns. I agree with the statement he made. I noticed it. I read his statement. He and I grew up in the first 10 years of our career were the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union was the greatest threat. There's no question in the 21st century, given Chinese power, and we've talked about this morning, China is the greatest threat to the security of our country and of the democratic world.
Thank you. I want to ask you about the U.S.-China Phase 1 agreement. Remember, January of 2020, the United States and China signed a Phase 1 trade agreement. China committed to buy $468 billion of U.S. goods, energy, agriculture, and services over a 2-year period of time. They really do. China appears to be failing to comply to this agreement. Reports indicate that China's purchases have fallen far short for both 2020 and 2021. Do you believe China is committed to abiding by its promises under this agreement, and what are options available to us to ensure that China does fulfill the terms of the agreement?
Thank you, Senator. This is going to be a contentious issue, and it has been for a long time between our two countries. I think you know that the U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Catherine Tai, gave a speech here in Washington 2.5 weeks ago, and she was very forthright in saying, I'll just summarize her main point, saying that she would talk to her Chinese counterpart about that Phase 1 deal and about the performance of the Chinese government in meeting or not meeting its commitments. And I think she was right to suggest that that has to be the first order of business on trade with China. And obviously, we in the United States need to make investments in our own economy to strengthen it, which the President and Congress are working on. And we have to overcome the ravages of COVID-19 before we can probably get on to bigger initiatives. But I think she was right to start there, hold China to account for what it promised President Trump. And I think most observers and experts would say they have not fulfilled their obligations.
In addition to goods and energy and agriculture products, there's also intellectual property obligations under this U.S.-China Phase 1 agreement. What steps can we take to ensure that China fully implements and complies with the intellectual property commitment?
That's a key issue, because it gets to the systemic violations of China's WTO commitments. I named some of them in my statement: intellectual property theft, dumping, state subsidies, unfair labor practices. So when we talk to the Chinese about trade, part of it is our two-way $559 billion trade relationship in goods and then more in services. Part of it is getting at these systemic problems that I think every recent president has wrestled the Chinese on.
For my final question, earlier this year, China and Iran signed a memorandum of understanding in which China would invest as much as $400 billion in Iran over the next 25 years. Last month, Iran was accepted as a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. China's long been importing Iranian oil in contravention of U.S. sanctions on Iran. Sanctioned Iranian airlines continue to fly to China. Not simply a matter of a few Chinese companies violating U.S. law. There's a lot going on here. It appears to be a strategic decision by the Chinese government to allow these violations to take place. What's your assessment of the current relationship between China and Iran?
This is a very serious issue. As you portray it, and you're right, this is a closer relationship than China and Iran had, say, when I was the Iran negotiator for Secretary Condoleezza Rice. When China joined us in 3 UN Security Council sanctions resolutions, Chapter 7, against the Iranians in 2006, 7, and 8. And now they have a closer relationship. I think what we ought to do, and we will do, I'm sure, and the President Biden's administration, talk to the Chinese directly about this, and obviously hold the Chinese to account to abide by every UN Security Council sanctions resolution that prohibits most of this activity.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.